Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Wilds talk. Today I'm actually going to be talking about Wilds in relation to both World and Rise. With title update 1 landing tomorrow as this video goes out, what can we expect from future title updates? How impactful will they be? How can we compare title update 1 to title update 1s of the past? Well, based on this version of TU1 going out and the surprise May update that we're also getting, Wilds is already looking like one of the most updated Monster Truck games they've released, but is it the biggest title update 1? And we'll begin with World, which does have a major negative that I want to highlight throughout most of its run that shouldn't be ignored. The game originally released on consoles, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One at the time, back in January of 2018. But it wasn't until August 2018 that it finally released in its base version on PC. So with that in mind, the game wasn't even available for PC players when title update 1 of World hit. And unfortunately, that created a longer problem for PC players, where they were behind on updates, not just initially, but most of the way. I was a PC World player as well, which meant that I'd have to watch the new collab events and the title updates. They'd come out and I wouldn't have access to them. I remember being so frustrated that I took a small break from the game at the time. So for me, that was a major negative for whatever World did with their updates, and I'm so glad they finally caught up those updates for the different versions, as we'll talk about, and stopped doing that for future releases. But with that said, let's talk TU1. World released its first version back in January on the 26th, but it was March 22nd that the first title update hit, so that was almost 2 full months. Now compared to Wilds, we're barely over a full month with about 35 days between launch and title update 1, so that's a massive improvement between those two, half the time. But the thing is, this was the start of the title update concept with World, and while this update can be pretty stark compared to what we've become used to, it was the beginning of all of it, and it deserves that nod. Title update 1 featured Devil Joe, a fan favourite returning monster. We had an armour set and a weapon for actually each of the 14 weapons. There was also an added mantle at the time, the dragon-proof one, which makes me wonder whether we'll get new mantles in Wilds based on title updates. Later, there was also the familiar Spring Blossom event that landed, which is going to drop in Wilds but will be a lot bigger in Wilds by comparison. Not long after that, there was also the incredible Wyvern Ignition Greatsword that was added after a community weapon design contest, and is still one of the coolest greatswords to this day. They did do other minor tweaks and a mini collab at one point. So overall, it was 1 monster and 1 new armor set and weapons with that. Which, you know, compared to Wilds and Update 1, we're getting 2 new monsters at the launch of it, one with 2 versions thanks to Tempered Mizu, kind of comparable to Soulseer at least from what we've seen. We're also of course getting that new version of Spring Blossom, which does look a lot more involved and interesting by comparison. We're also later getting the May update, which is going to feature more weapon rebalancing and a big update for Hammer as they've said. And we're getting the first Arch-Tempered monster in a couple weeks in the form of Ray Dow. So that's overall going to be 3 new armor sets, 2 new waves of weapons, which I expect Zojier to be a full roster of weapons like Devil Joe was. But we should also mention in that May update, we're going to get harder versions of 5 monsters, Gore and the Apexes, which is going to feature new stuff like new wound resistance on top. So it's certainly hefty when compared directly to World's first update, but we can be reasonable here. Arch-Tempered is coming in a couple weeks. The May update's coming at the end of May. Not to mention Shia and its high rank version, should that have been in the game at launch? I think it's one of those valid points. If Shia was already in the game right now, it'd make it a bit more comparable, but overall, the Wilds title update is pretty big compared to World's first one. But now let's jump over to Iceborne, the expansion of World, and consider its title update 1. First update for Iceborne featured Rajang and the introduction of layered armor. Funny to think back, isn't it, that layered equipment has been such a given now. But yeah, Iceborne released initially on the 6th of September 2019, and title update 1 dropped October 10th, so just barely over a month later, much more similar to our current Wilds timeline. It wasn't until February 6th in 2020 that the PC version of that update eventually came, as a reminder of how separate those updates were. It's my understanding that in April of 2020, that's when we finally had the updates start to align for World between the PC version and the console versions, so that's finally where they got over that hump. Either way, this update featured Rajang, but also importantly, layered armor. The introduction was a cool concept, a special Kirin hunt with an already broken horn leading to that encounter with Rajang. Naturally, there's Rajang armor as an armor set and the weapons, but there was also a new area added called the volcanic region of the Guiding Lands. So you could really imagine that as like a new zone for one of the maps you already have in Wilds. but it did open up new stuff, like monsters that fit in that type of zone could also be there, and that introduced new features. But yes, it was a monster and its gear, a new area with some important mini features thanks to that, and layered armor. That entire concept was a big deal at the time because your layered options were very limited. Now you could actually make all kinds of sets and mix and match how you wanted, so a big moment for that system. It wasn't until the expansion and then the first update after that they finally had something that was instantly available here in Wilds. So Wilds maintains its bigger update 1 status so far, but at least they're comparable in timeline in Iceborne to Wilds. Next we'll jump over to Rise, where things are pretty shocking. I remember it being very unfortunate to say the least, and looking back at it, definitely. There were just 2 title updates of Rise overall compared to 5 or 6 for the rest, and it introduced monsters and features really should have been there at launch. It's commonly thought that the 2 title updates of Rise didn't really add to the game's base in this kind of update or expansion way, but more like finished what was clearly unfinished, like literally the main story wasn't finished until title update 2. There was a pretty valid reason at the time though. COVID struck during development of the game, and unfortunately Rise did take a blow because of it. This was reflected in the way they referred to the title updates as patch 2.0 and 3.0. What is incredible though, is that Rise released on March 26th, back in 2021, which wasn't that long after Iceborne officially stopped with its updates. It gave us that feeling of a small gap between full game releases, which was pretty amazing. Unfortunately, of course Rise was a Switch exclusive at its launch, and it wasn't until a good while after that that it released onto other platforms. So again, that highlights how incredible it is that Wilds launched on all platforms at the same time, and it was crossplay from the beginning. So for title update 1 then for Rise, it launched in April on the 28th. That's once again roughly 1 month after the launch, just like Iceborne and now Wilds. So we had a lot more content there than we've seen in both Update 1 World and Iceborne. But it's hard to praise too much because again, it was a lot of base features missing from the game. Like they only just unlocked the hunter rank caps with this update, which is something that you'd expect at the end of the story. Anyway, the big 3 were added at the time. The Elder Dragons, Teostra, Kushala and Chameleos. That meant 3 big fights, 3 armor sets, their weapon sets, which is comparable to what we're seeing in Wilds Update 1. However, to our shock, there was also the return of Basil, which again had its own equipment. And further, there were Apex monster additions, but to be fair, that was at the end of the mini-game. Some people liked, some people certainly didn't. The Rampage. It meant that these monsters were fought after a long event, and then there wasn't actually equipment or rewards for any Apex monsters. In contrast, just a few of the Apex monsters you could only fight at the end of these rampages, where they were given a kind of normal hunt in real gameplay. But again, no equipment. I should also mention the layered system here. It was only in Title Update 1 that layered equipment was added. And you couldn't just use the system, you did have to get some outfit vouchers as a kind of crafting system, so a bit more effort than what we have in Wilds. At least the layered armor came a lot sooner than the expansion, but it was still a wait until Title Update 1. So, Wilds once again takes a big win there. So in conclusion, Title Update 1 for Rise was actually pretty big. Bigger than any of the other ones we've looked at so far, even when we think about Wilds a bit. But again, that was part to missing features. You could argue Zoshia should be in base Wilds, but you could definitely argue about the apexes and how they should have been huntable outside of the rampage from the start, how they should actually have equipment, which they never got. You could argue that the story having no actual ending, but a cliffhanger until Update 2, by the way, was a big issue. And you could argue, layered armor should have been there at the start. The hunter rank cap mechanic. But 3 Elder Dragons and a surprise Basil, that was really good. It was an awesome update. A bit more damning in that way was the second title update. That was version 3.0, May 27th, 2021. And the last major update for base Rise, only 2. It finished the story at last with All Mother Nawa, but it did add Crimson Glow Valstrax, which was incredible. They did also make the Apex monsters as regular hunts, and added Apex Zinogre. But again, no equipment. So it wasn't until June 30th the following year that Sunbreak and that expansion launched. A lot of this issue could be credited validly to COVID, but it was unfortunate. Finally though, we get to Sunbreak and its first title update for Rise's expansion. Sunbreak launched June 30th, 2022, with Title Update 1 coming once again about a full month later, August 10th. The title updates were much better now, like Iceborne, 6 occurred total. For Title Update 1 though, it was pretty big. For one, it reintroduced the forlorn arena or area found in the older games. It's got some important lore implications, it was very cool to see. It became the main map for some of the special, most difficult challenges later added. With that came the main event monster, Lucent Nagakuga, special for that arena. With its own equipment and important involved skills we have in Wilds. There was sneak attack and adrenaline rush. Sneak attack actually made you deal more damage by attacking from behind, right? But now we have the actual sneak attack mechanic in Wilds, and technically with that, the ambush skill in Wilds associated with that, maybe inspired by Lucent Nagakuga. Meanwhile, adrenaline rush we also have in Wilds right now, the idea of getting a buff post iframe use. And it is indeed in Wilds a meta skill if your build can benefit from it. There were other monsters too, both Gold Rathian and Silver Rathalos came in this update. They were awesome, featuring new mechanics and of course their own gear, which I remember being very impactful at the time. And on top of that, somehow there was another monster, the seething version of Basil, which I believe was a Iceborne new variant. So that's 4 monsters for update 1, which introduced a new arena map at the same time. But there was more. There's the investigation system called Anomaly Investigations. Sunbreak introduced a type of monster called Afflicted Monsters, and you can really compare them and imagine them to our tempered system in Wilds. So that featured varying levels of difficulty. These Afflicted Monsters would reward special parts if you broke them, like tempered wounds in Wilds. But separate from Hunter rank, there was the Anomaly Research rank. So by progressing that rank, you'd unlock higher tier Afflicted hunts, and new monsters would be given that Afflicted tag. More and more would get that as the game progressed. By hunting these scaling challenges, you get different parts based on the challenge, which would then be used for augmentation, a system to improve your equipment. A crazy system because it would let you RNG roll your gear for new changes. So on armor, that could mean adding new skills, more decoration slots, maybe even taking away skills in exchange. There was also a weapon version of that, which had, much less RNG. It let you add target improvements like attack, affinity, sharpness boosts, that kind of thing. Definitely comparable to the Artian crafting we have in Wilds. It's just they took the RNG of the armor augmentation and put it all into weapons, with Artian crafting having no RNG, but then Artian reinforcement, we have the RNG there. So it's really cool how they've really refined the systems of the past for base Wilds. So overall, Sunbreak has had the meatiest first title update with 4 monsters, a new arena, 2 major endgame systems added, the Afflicted rank and progression of that, and the equipment augmentation stuff. In Wilds, we already have the Artian crafting, and we already have tempered monsters for most of the monsters, and the relic system involved with that. Surprisingly comparable actually to what we saw with Curious Augmentation and the Afflicted monsters. In the first update, we'll get 3 more monsters and the Gathering Hub, which seems to be much more involved than previous hubs, and so I think that's quite comparable in terms of update size. Title Update 1 for Sunbreak certainly makes up for Base Rise with all the hefty stuff they put into it, and depending on how Wild's Title Update 1 goes, Sunbreak's TU1 might still be the best of the series. We'll have to see how we feel. But we've seen this continuous trend of Title Update 1s being heavily improved, involving more content, adding new endgame systems. And with Wilds, we're going to get that mid-Title update coming at the end of May. But to cap this video off then, what can we hope for when it comes to Wilds and future updates? I think easily equal to 5 or 6 title updates, which has been about the average for the history of the title updates, is expected. World had 5, Iceborne had 6, Rise had the very unfortunate 2, and Sunbreak was back up to 5, with technically 6 thanks to a special bonus one that featured Primordial Malzeno. They brought back the Sunbreak flagship for one final ridiculous fight, so maybe we'll see something like that for Arkveld at the end of Wilds. That'd be cool. Either way, I don't think we'll see a repeat of Base Rise, that's for sure, and based on the recent director's letter and the May update, I think it's reasonable to hope for or even expect these mini updates mid-title update, which is even beyond what we'd normally hope for. But yeah, I hope this look back helps you put into context Wilds and its first title update and where things stand in comparison. I think Wilds has had a very strong opening. It's just, Shia that you could argue could have been in the base game as a high rank option. Some people say things like Arch-Tempered Ray should have been there too, but I definitely think that's jumping too far. And considering the base camps and massive lobbies already in base Wilds, I also think the Gathering Hub being added in title update 1 is completely fine and wasn't something missing from the game. But what do you guys think? And either way, we'll soon be back to cover all things Title Update 1, But until then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.